Yeah, baby, it's episode 230 of The Whiners. No, not 230, episode 30 of The Whiners.
Oh,
I'm
how
200
nice.
episodes ahead on April 17th, 2025. Jeff Norman back in Wilmington, North Carolina after a visit to Austin, where I had the exquisite pleasure of hanging out with Ryan and his wife, Pat. Good times. Thanks for being such a gracious host, Ryan.
It was nice.
Yeah, we went to a tasting. This was a tasting that was presented by a winemaker from Lebanon.
Chateau
Hochar.
Moussar.
Yeah, Chateau Moussar. And the winemaker's name is Mark Hochar. It was at a very swanky restaurant called Jeffrey's.
Yes,
It was for the wine buyers of upscale restaurants. And our good buddy Mark, who is a distributor, invited us, and we were, I think, the only ones who weren't wine buyers. And I don't know about you, but I never drank wine like that before. Have you?
No, it wasn't just the fact that we were tasting 70-year-old wines, because there were a lot of varieties there, but they were also very different than an Italian, a French wine. I mean, just very different.
And I didn't even know how to behave. But luckily, the people sitting near us were not snobby at all, and they coached me on how to behave, because there's a certain protocol. Each of us got 4 glasses. You pour it in, and then you either drink it or spit it out, and then the glasses become empty for the next round or whatever the word is. So I appreciate that they were very nice about it. And then afterwards, we posed. That's Mark Hochar there, the one that's next to me. And our friend Jenny, who we met, she's the sommelier at an Italian restaurant called Sammy's.
Yes, top-rated restaurant, turns out.
That's right. And we ate there on my last night in Austin. There we are at Sammy's.
And I have to say, it was really something. First, at the previous event, which you didn't have the one picture, but we had all of those wine glasses in front of us, and then we had that list of all the wines that we were going to taste. And when you look down the table, there were just rows of the glasses. Everything was mapped out. People were pouring the water. They were pouring the wine. You had to compare the wines. Some wines were 20 years old.
It was orchestrated with great precision.
It really was. And then what really got me, because you said Jenny is a sommelier. Of course, anybody out there who knows anything about the wine, they know there's different levels of that. And what got me at a certain point was he was talking about the percentages of the different grapes in the wine. And then he asked everybody, what was the third grape? What was the third variety in the glass? And they voted, and there were 2, and the one, Tempranillo, won out. And I mean, it was pretty impressive that they could taste the different
Very
varieties.
Sophisticated palate. Yeah, unlike me, I could barely. I knew that I enjoy, what wines I liked and didn't like, but I couldn't come close to them as far as making those distinctions. Exactly. The other thing is the price. There was a price list because they are wine buyers, and most of the bottles were $100 or more, and that's for restaurants, which I assume would get it at a lower price than in stores. So this was really top-level wine. And
well,
the
50-year-old. Hold on a second. That 50-year-old wine was almost $400.
That's right. Yeah, 1975.
and we were tasting wine at 11 a.m. And I decided to leave work to do that. And now I know why they all spit out the wine, because after hours of tasting wine, you would definitely be totally buzzed and couldn't function too well.
Well, it's yes and no. I mean,
I was
not spitting it out. I was drinking it. And I don't think it added up to more than 2 glasses of wine, because they didn't fill it each time. It was just a little bit. And well, actually, I didn't spit it up, but I poured out some of it. Yeah. What I did was I tasted a little bit of each.
Well, it got to be too tasty to spit out for me.
That was it. I mean, I don't get it that often. So anyway, tonight I'm doing 2 things I don't typically do, which is I went to my store in Wilmington, which, as I've said before, has the world's most generic name to it. It is called Wine Store. And I drove in my car, which I like to call car. Anyway, they give taste if I want. I usually just take the guy's recommendation, but they had this on sale there for $10. The average price around the country is $14. And I usually don't even bother with the taste, but I tasted it and I didn't like it that much. So then I did the second thing that I wouldn't normally do is since I didn't like it, I bought it anyway. So I figured maybe after everybody's saying it's great, it won this blind taste test, and maybe it's just me, and after it breathes, it'll be better. So I opened it about an hour ago. It's better than at first, but I don't know. I don't.
You're not really that impressed, though, it sounds like.
No, it's okay. What are you drinking?
Well, before I say, by the way, Somerville John, he wanted to know if we had any cheese with our wine, and actually, they didn't serve any food until after all the tasting, and there were a bunch of different cheeses, breads, and my favorite were the deviled eggs, where they had an entire black truffle in the egg, and I ate about $200 worth of those.
Yeah, they had great appetite. Not only what you mentioned, a few other appetizers too. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm doing something different. I'm drinking a rosé. Nice, chilled, 65 degrees, little colder than 65. It is also a French, but I figured I would go for something different. People wanted to know, do we drink red wines or just red wine? So this one is very tasty. It's a average price of $20. And the thing that is good about it is you see the 25% sin salt. So the reason I brought that up is that when we were in the tasting, they kept saying what one of the other grapes was, and that's the one. And they said, the Cabernet Sauvignon is the skeleton, solid structure of that red wine, and the sin salt is like the dressing that makes it taste nice. So here we have it in this wine also, but it's a white, it's not a red, so kind of cool, I thought.
All right, I think it's perfect for somebody who's strangely effeminate. Seems
it's
about
summer.
Right.
It's summer. It's like
Whatever.
86 degrees here.
Whatever. All right, tonight we're going to mock some black women. Hopefully not to the point where anybody will accuse us of being racist, although you probably are a little bit racist. But I think we're also going to defend black people at a certain point. And then next week, maybe let's make up for it by mocking white people. There's plenty of people who deserve to be mocked.
There's a lot of people we can mock, for sure.
Yeah. Let's start with Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York. And she was made herself famous within the past year or so by charging Donald Trump with the most picayune offense, which was falsifying applications on banking loan applications. And it's ridiculous because he overvalued
that's right,
what his buildings,
the property. Yeah.
But the banks do their own assessment, and they testified that that's exactly what they do. They don't care what he puts down. Didn't hurt anybody, didn't take any, there's absolutely nobody harmed. They said he paid them back. They're happy to do business with him again. But Letitia James tried to turn it into a major crime. And I think...
Well, there was like a payout, though, that he had to, a fine he had to pay.
Well, I think he's appealing it. Yeah, it's ridiculously high. Like, I forgot, basically, they're trying to ruin him. So
right.
Yeah. And I think the award, I forgot the award, it was extremely high. I know what you're talking about, but I think that's on appeal now, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so it turns out that Letitia James appears to have falsified some records herself in very much the same way. News has come out that the Bill Pulte, who is the director of federal housing, sent a letter to Pam Bondi and he has discovered that she falsified some records. And this is what they call a criminal referral. It's a letter that just spells it out, and she hasn't been charged at this point. But this includes claiming that a 5-unit building she owned had only 4 units, and that's because the type of loan she was trying to get, they're not eligible for if it has more than 4 units.
Exactly.
Her father co-signed for a loan, but she listed him as her husband.
That's right.
And she claimed Virginia as her principal residence in order to get more favorable terms there for a second home. And the reason is you get better terms if it's your first home, because if you do get into financial difficulty, on average, people are going to make sure they pay for their first home first. So it's more risky if it's your second. Yeah. So Jonathan Turley, who is an American treasure, went on TV, and here's what he had to say.
The irony is perfectly crushing. This is a person who prosecuted Trump for everything short of ripping a label off a mattress. And among the charges that were brought in New York, in not just the civil but the criminal case, was making false or misleading statements to financial institutions. And one of these sections, Section 1014 of the federal code, is prosecuted. It took me about 60 seconds of a search to find cases that the Department of Justice brought against people who falsely claimed that property was their principal residence in order to get loans. So this is well-tread areas for the Justice Department. As for James, if we apply the Letitia James standard that she created, there'd be little question here. This seems pretty straightforward. What the administration is saying is this was not her principal residence. In fact, as a New York elected official, she had to say that her principal residence was in New York. This was an out-of-state residence. But also, they claim that in some of these forms, she actually states that her father is her husband in order to file as a married couple. So there's a lot of those questions. And as you know, the Supreme Court just stated earlier in March in a case called Thompson that they want to see knowing false statements under sections like 1014, not just misleading statements. These are misleading statements. Either it's your principal residence or it's not.
Or it's not.
Either you're married to your father or he's your father. So they can this can satisfy the Thompson standard.
So there's a couple things there. By the way, the fine on Trump was $450 million. Yeah, so that was one thing.
If I had that kind of money, I could get through maybe the whole summer.
There was, and I forget who it was, but I was looking at some of the stories on this Letitia James, and one of the CBS experts said about this thing about listing her father as her husband. Well, this is just, basically she said, it's just, hateful and stirring up trouble because the statute of limitations has run out on that. And I thought that was kind of weird because that didn't address the fact that she was falsifying it in the first place.
Right, but it is worth mentioning if they can't even, and for those of you who don't know what the statute of limitations is, that means once a certain amount of time has gone by, then they can no longer be prosecuted for it.
Right.
And I think it's relevant to point out whether or not it has expired. Mm-hmm. And it was a long time ago, so I wouldn't be surprised if it has, but Turley didn't mention that, and I don't know. I think it was 1983 and 2000. There were 2 instances for doing that. But when she claimed Virginia as her principal residence, that was in 2023. Mm-hmm. So. Well,
I mean, the whole thing about statute of limitations that I was thinking about is, when this is this whole right wing versus left wing fight, so when a conservative guy is brought up to go to the Supreme Court, well, they talk about something he did in high school that, was untoward. They're always going back and digging up all of these things. And that's like everything hinges on these things. And now
Yeah.
here, this is a financial thing. It's just a little strange to me, right?
Well, I don't like her at all, but I like to be fair. And the other thing about it is, since, if the statute of limitations has expired, that would mean that she doesn't even have the opportunity to present a defense because she's not going to be prosecuted. So I'm not too big on, making an issue out of that. But we'll see. We'll see.
It just seems like it's everybody likes to make these claims, and then it's they don't like it when it comes back at them.
So do you remember, I guess it was a week or so ago, not too long ago, I was telling you about how amused I am by the New York Post headlines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were
And
here, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the classic headline is after some stripper got killed or somebody got killed. Yeah, I think it was a stripper got killed and she was decapitated. The New York Post headline was
Right.
Headless body in topless bar.
Yeah.
That's like the all-time classic. So the New York Post came out with a real doozy for our friend Letitia James. Let's take a look.
A Tish best served cold. Oh, that I didn't get it the first
The
time.
mafia thing, a dish served cold. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Revenge is a dish best served cold.
There you go. That's like the mafia motto.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So the other thing about her is like in New York, and this is such a weird thing in general, is some of these attorney generals already, well, maybe all of them, I'm not sure, but it seems kind of weird that they're elected. So, in other words, you would hope, I don't know, maybe as I'm saying this, I'm not even sure I believe it, but a part of me thinks that like if they were appointed, then maybe they'd have to go through some process, and whereas the average person doesn't know much, and when they campaign, they start saying all these things just to please voters, and it doesn't really serve, the interests of justice, in my opinion. But,
yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. The thing is, isn't it also the question of the voters doing the work to actually hold them accountable as well? Everything is so political as opposed to, well, what is the actual policy?
well, yeah, but they don't do the work. I don't think the voters have good judgment, and the way they behave in New York towards Trump is they were pleasing the voters. So here's a portion of a speech that Letitia James made just a few days ago in front of Al Sharpton and his organization. Does this sound like a sober jurist who is, just committed to the law and, isn't going to politicize things, or what?
Mission is clear. I'm focused. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I've been trained by the best. I went to Howard University that overturned legal segregation in this country. I've been taught in those classrooms where Thurgood Marshall once taught. I'm not afraid of no president. Donald Trump, we're ready for you. We're coming for you. We're standing up for you. We're fighting on. We're not going down silent. Victory, my friends, is clear. It's now. And I'm not waiting 4 years. I'm waiting 2 until a speaker by the name of Hakeem Jeffries comes to bring us some rest. Come on, ladies. It's up to us. We saved this democracy before. We'll save it now. Let's go.
No, she doesn't politicize things at all. I love how she's bragging about what a great education she has, and then she says, "I'm not afraid of no president."
No president.
Like Jasmine Crockett, doing the ghetto shtick.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the messaging. It's all part of the dynamics on stage, that kind of thing. I don't know what's going to happen with her now. Maybe the whole career. I actually find it interesting because she is New York, and you also had Mayor Adams, who was being taken out, and now he's not. Right? He's staying in power. So it's just all of these realignments.
Well, yeah, but he's got very little time left. He has to win an election in a couple or so months.
Yeah. Well, maybe he'll end up getting endorsed by Donald Trump for,
Even
what
could
does
be
that
the kiss
mean?
Of death. That could be the kiss of death.
Who knows? That's true. It's true.
I don't know that Trump is popular in New York. So this is an issue that purportedly affects black people. Another issue in the news, and that's the Real ID thing. Now, I just flew to Austin and came home again, and I used my driver's license. And so,
Do you have it on there?
No, I'm not. I don't. I saw in the news that some people have it already if it's got a star in the corner.
Yeah, the Texas
no
one.
star.
Mine has that.
No, mine doesn't either. But you know what?
No, it does. Mine does.
Yeah. I vaguely remember when I got my license that I was offered that option, but I didn't know what the person was talking about. So I'm like, just give me a regular one.
Yeah.
So, and now that I've been to Austin, I'm thinking, I may want to go back again. What a pain in the ass this would be. But they'll also accept a passport as instead of a real ID card.
Well,
I don't really want to take my passport with me, but I think I might rather do that for now rather than stand in long lines at the DMV.
so the whole thing is on the passport, right? People are saying, well, this Real ID is just like a passport. So the question is, well, then why isn't the passport good enough? And the same people that are, I mean, you have Thomas Massie, who is definitely opposed to it. And I have there's some interesting things from when Real ID was first brought into existence. Yeah. Won't stop terrorists from hijacking. Exactly.
Right. They had passports from other countries. So how are you going to say, well, if it meets the standard of whatever this Real ID thing is?
No, that's absolutely true. But when you said using your passport, so over the next 2 years, they're talking about a phased enforcement. And Massie and others are saying, well, this is unconstitutional because it usurps states' rights and individual rights. And then they also point to the fact that one section of the Real ID Act was written by the sponsor of the Patriot Act. So this is actually Ron Paul, when this was first written, this was him in the Congress actually campaigning from the floor against it.
In this bill, there are no limitations of the information that may be placed on this identification card. There are minimum standards, but no maximum limitations. And the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security can add anything at once. So if they would like to put on there the fact that you belong to a pro-gun group, it may well appear on your national ID card because there may be an administration someday that might like to have that information. But there's no limitations as far as biometrics. There's no limitations as far as radio frequency identification. That technology is already available and being used on our passports, which means that you don't have to show your papers. All you have to do is walk by somebody that has a radio frequency ability to read your passport or read your driver's license.
So what do you think of what he says?
Well, is it the same, the legislation that he was referring to back then? Is it the same legislation that's in it?
Yes.
Yeah. I assuming he's accurate, and I do assume he's accurate, then that's a terrible thing. I'm not going to trust Congress not to add ridiculous criteria.
Well, it's also what he said is that it's a political thing potentially, right?
Yeah. Well, you always have to define stuff. People always react to labels, like that tells the whole story. But whether you're for or against a Real ID, it's not the most meaningful way to have a conversation. The way to have a meaningful conversation is the way he said it, is like, what's the definition of a Real ID? Mm-hmm. And so if I heard him correctly, he's saying it could be anything.
Right. Well, it could be, or they could add anything, because if it has electronic transmitting capabilities, you've heard about credit card skimmers, or people who have devices that can collect credit card numbers right out of your wallet as they're walking by you. or at the gas station, right? So the potential is that your real ID would be sort of like the credit card with the microchip, and it could transmit something with an RFID chip. So those are the kinds of things he's talking about, which the question I'd say is, how do you guarantee that we're protected and not abused?
Yeah. I mean, that's the legitimate concern, that it's just a surveillance thing. And, the flip side of it is it's often convenient. Like in China, they can pay for products just by waving their hand at a machine. And in a sense, that's kind of cool. But on the other hand, maybe it's a little bit creepy. Let's take a look at this video.
China, and I'm going to Shenzhen by train. So I've forgotten my phone and I want to get something from the store. So I'm at 7-Eleven. So I'm going to pick up the sparkling water. And what's very interesting is they actually have, so I'm going to scan it. They actually have WeChat Palm Pay. So that's my WeChat ID. That's my WeChat ID, and I just paid without having my cards or my wallet on me or my phone, which is pretty crazy, mind-blowing. You don't have to take anything with you when you go and travel. So that's the beauty of China. It just shows how ahead China is in terms of technology.
So the thing is, the convenient factor, also it is in Russia. I had another video where a young girl walks into a coffee shop and pays just by smiling at something.
That is convenient. I don't know about you, but everywhere I go, I bring my hand automatically. I don't have to remember to bring my hand.
You don't leave it, that's for sure, right?
I don't know if I bring my smile, but I definitely bring my hand.
So, I mean, the question is, there is the convenience, and then there is the sort of big brother aspect of it. And I mentioned the author of the Real ID was the author of the Patriot Act. So already back in 2013, Congressman Sensenbrenner had said, well, the Patriot Act itself has now been used to justify broader national security agency spying powers. And of course, this is after when Edward Snowden came out with his revelations. So, are they all the same thing? I'm not sure that they're all the same thing.
Well, these are overlapping issues. Like the voter ID thing is overlapping too. Because I think you should be required to show an ID to vote. But on the other hand, what is the ID? I don't want it to be too difficult to get or some, crazy criteria. Here's Sunny Hostin, who's a total dodo, one of the View hosts, talking about how it's something to do with slavery.
Oh yeah.
Don't have cars, don't have driver's licenses. So it's sort of a vestige of, I think, post-slavery laws where Black people had to prove their right to vote, and oftentimes they couldn't vote because they couldn't pass some crazy test or they didn't have the appropriate ID. It also affects women that are married. Maybe your passport reflects something that's different on your birth certificate or on your driver's license. So really the bottom line is voter suppression. And I agree with him 100%. It's a brilliant notion that less voter ID laws allows more people to vote. And most democracies do it that way. We're the only ones that really don't do it that way.
Right. I mean,
so that's a big lie.
Well, I mean, actually, it's kind of the truth, but it doesn't get to what matters. I mean, I wouldn't dispute that more people will vote if they don't have to show their ID, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have to show their ID.
She said democracy.
Mean that the average Black person or the average anybody has trouble getting an ID.
Wait a second. Let's look at what somebody else said who did the man on the street interview about that very same thing.
Everybody,
said
Sunny Hostin. I'm sure that whatever she has to say is super hinged and super sane.
This is funny.
Post-slavery laws.
So she goes through that. Hold on a second. So he goes.
I got a better one, I think. I mean,
you do?
Yeah.
Because he actually interviews.
Yeah. Well, I got a better one.
You got a better one? All right, fine.
Want to get into?
All right, go ahead.
here in East
You have-
Harlem to ask
This is
black
the one
people
that's what I
their
thought. I'm
thoughts
sorry.
on what you just heard.
Yeah.
Do you have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yes, I have state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so like, we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. Like, that's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy camera?
I know, right?
That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Oh, really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get the DMV?
Yeah, like I'd
know where
punch
it
you
is?
if you kept
You get
asking me
there?
that.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity.
I had access to the internet for years.
This is what I meant before when I said I was going to stick up for black people. What Sonny Hostin said is racist. I'm with
Yes.
these people. Black people are just as able as anybody else to get IDs. So
No, it's ridiculous. You did say they all overlap, but this is playing the game. It's just like Letitia James beforehand, where she's trying to get the somehow this cheap version of rage. This woman was hilarious too.
yeah, she resents that she's being treated as a moron. Because
But the thing,
do you
the
know
whole.
do you
Go ahead.
remember our first co-host who was with us for the first couple of episodes, Wiley?
Wiley, yeah.
Yeah. She and I got into an argument about this. It wasn't on the show. It was on the phone. And she was insisting that it is so difficult for some, like elderly black people in particular. And I guess she was saying that, well, you can't just go to the DMV. She was saying you have to show them your birth certificate or something. And some of these elderly black people, they can't get their birth certificate because there are no records and this and that. And I'm like, you know what? If that's true, I could be persuaded. But where is the information about that? Show me something. Show me something. And she couldn't show me anything. The only thing that she said was that I should read this book that was published in 2003 by Greg Palast. And she told me that he explains why it's so difficult for some black people to get ID. And I'm like, 2003? I want to know why it's difficult now. And she's like, well, nothing has changed. What do you mean everything has changed in the last 12 years?
Yeah.
So I don't know. If there's anybody out there, since this is an issue in the news, you would think somebody would write an article about it, just 500-word regular article, 750 words, something like that, that explains why it's so difficult, if it really is. I don't buy it at all.
But also every country almost, except for the United States, has voter IDs, some kind of a national ID thing. I know that whenever I was in Russia, everywhere you go, no matter what you're buying, if you're buying tickets to, a theme park, you just show the passport. They want everybody, and I think that's their main ID over there is the passport. So everybody just carries it. Somebody in the chat saying everywhere in Europe you're doing that. So it does seem to be ridiculous entirely.
I have a friend who insists that there just aren't that many people who are voting, who shouldn't be. And I'm like, well, how do you know? If they don't have to prove it, how do you know? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, this has been a problem in Arizona where they're talking about extra votes that had to be purged off of the voter rolls, and there's lawsuits about that all the time. The whole thing about Social Security with Doge, where they have people that are 120 years old still receiving Social Security checks. We don't even have the documentation for that. So how are you able to track all this stuff down?
I don't know. Well, if anybody wants to call in, the number's 520-525-8359. That's 520-525-8359.
One more thing.
You can talk. Hang on one second. You can talk about anything at all, not just what I said to inform us about that. Anything at all.
I was just thinking about this.
What?
Speaking of this whole national voter ID thing, if it had been, say, Joe Biden, or if it was Kamala Harris saying everybody needed a national voter ID, then they would be for it. And there was something recently where they were saying everybody has to do it. And then it dawned on me, COVID. Everybody was told who worked at a company that they had to show proof that they had the COVID vaccine, or else they could be fired from their job.
That's right. But you know what? I remember I got the one vaccine and then a booster, and I remember the card they gave me. It looked incredibly easy to fake that card.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
That's no real ID,
I know, but I'm just saying, it just seems pretty ridiculous. And of course, our friend Hassan says in Iran, you take birth certificate or national ID with you. See, Iran agrees with Donald Trump. Oh my! Are
you happy that Donald Trump called off the attack to Iran? Did you see the news? That's also mentioned in Scott Ritter's new article. Which
no, I didn't know that actually yet.
Yeah. Read it at ustourofduty.org or scottritter.com. Brand new article highlighted right at the top of the page.
Oh, that was the article that just came out like in the last few hours.
That is correct.
Yes, I saw that. I didn't read it yet, for sure.
Well, that's okay. It's not a homework assignment. Don't worry about it.
I got to take notes.
But I know Hassan is always up on these things, so I would imagine does Hassan still live in Iran, or he's from Iran?
No, he lives in Iran.
Oh, okay.
In fact, he said he's called. Hasn't he called in? I can't remember if he's called in. No, he called in.
It may cost him money to make an international call, but if he does webcam, then we can have him come in that way.
That's true.
Also, here's another one of our Iranian friends now coming in from Iran with her mic muted. Mic muted.
I'm sorry. Okay.
You're only 11 minutes late. No problem.
No, it's
I was just waiting for you guys to finish the segment. So.
Was that it? Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
But
all right. Well, as long as let's mock one more black woman then before we get to the issue.
Morgan, perfect. Not you though. Not you. We're not mocking you.
No, she's an Iranian woman. Gayle King was one of the broads who went up to space for a few minutes, and she's very unhappy that people are making light of it, and she basically thinks of herself as an astronaut now. Here's what she has to say.
Number 3, please don't call it a ride. That is not a friggin' ride. Whenever a man goes up, you have never said to an astronaut, boy, what a ride. We duplicated the same trajectory that Alan Shepard did back in the day, pretty much. No one called that a ride. It was called a flight. It was called a journey, because a ride implies that it's something frivolous or something that's lighthearted. There was nothing frivolous about what we did.
Yeah, I like that song. I mean, so first of all, that people are saying that it was fake, that they went into space, and there are pictures of the pod sitting on the ground, and there's a hand sticking out that is clearly a mannequin hand.
I have not seen that. I've seen other things
it was a previous thing.
Well, I'll take their word for it that they really went to space for a few minutes, but they were just sitting there. They weren't astronauts. They were passengers, right?
That's right. So, and also the question is, I think they had to pay. In 2021, when it was Blue Origin, I guess, went to space, it was like $28 million, and everybody that was going to go had to put down $150,000 deposit. Because part of her argument is, well, to attack this means you're telling young girls don't become scientists and astronauts. But I mean, what young girl's going to be able to plunk down 150 grand or anybody for something like that?
Yeah, I haven't gotten a metric on how much the ticket costs. I know the whole thing costs
They-
28 million.
Yeah, but they're not saying how much they had to.
Mhm.
That hasn't been done.
So if it's attainable, but there was 2 women who were a part of STEM it's completely overshadowed. But that I think that should have been highlighted. These 2 women, who they were. I think that's kind of the aspirational thing.
Which one? Which one? Tell us.
I don't know their names. That's kind of like the upsetting part. But 2 of the passengers were like members who were, highly intellectual in STEM. But I haven't gathered their names. I'm sorry.
Would you
I'm
want to
kind of
go
an
to
adult,
space,
too.
Morgan?
Would you
I'm
go to
sorry?
space?
Would you want to go to space?
I would. If I'm going to be honest with you, the privatization of it really does irk me. I liked how, in America, you could be happy about NASA, feel like you're a part of it, that you own some of the gains that they've made in a way where
Right.
it kind of makes you proud to be American, as opposed to this being kind of a private venture where only the elites and their
I
their
understand.
showmen like the Katy Perrys get to go up there.
So that's an issue, but you're not worried about the safety of it or anything like that.
No.
No,
I mean,
listen,
they
I'm,
just
I'm afraid to
they
go on
just-
most amusement park rides, like a Tilt-A-Whirl. I wouldn't even go on a Tilt-A-Whirl.
That's
This is much riskier than the Tilt-A-Whirl.
Well,
Yeah.
here's the thing on the commercialization, because and I have to brag a little bit just because of some very remote association right here, 10 minutes down the street from where I live, is Firefly Aeronautics, and on March 2nd, I think it was, they became the first commercial company to land on the moon with a little pod that looked very similar to the one that landed back in the 60s or 70s. I think that what NASA did, I agree with you, everything with NASA, you do feel like it's part of your national mission to do that. And I think you're right. But I think that if you're going to pioneer some of the other challenges, like how do you get to Mars or how do you do these other things, you're going to need private companies to figure out all the technology to do it. And so they're going to sit on the shoulders of NASA. I don't think that NASA will go away, although Donald Trump did actually have a bill, I think, to cut NASA some large amount. So maybe I need to eat my words on that. But the idea is that the government, NASA, can play roles with testing facilities, setting the standards to make sure that whatever it is that they're going to invent actually ensures that it's safe and that it works.
That's a fair critique. I still hang on to the fact that it's a sense of pride that you got from it being, a national endeavor as opposed to some private venture. And that's
Just
You
to
don't wanna
make money. I
represent
know.
your native land of Iran, be the first Iranian woman.
I did not know you were going to go this angle. I am not Iranian, no.
Whatever. So you're ashamed of it. You're a self-hating Iranian. I understand. All right. What's on your mind this week? You wanted to talk about President Bukele and his. He's the hippest dictator. They call him the hip dictator. He met with President Trump, who's I don't know if he's hip, but he's something or other. He's the funniest dictator, and Bukele is the hippest dictator.
I mean, to preface this, I don't know. I still am up in the air. He has really shown me a lot of reasons not to like him recently. I liked him initially because although
Bukele or Trump?
Bukele.
Okay.
Because of his tactics of cleaning up his country may have seemed a little draconian and a bit snappy, as just locking up anybody who had a tattoo. There is legitimate reason that some of these cartel members, once they get a tattoo, that means they've murdered somebody. So there is, you can't really be too kind with that aspect, as well as it was the murder capital of the world. One of the things that I really liked about Bukele is that a few years ago, after he got elected, he sat down all of the elected officials down in a room, and he said that he was going to interrogate and interview each one of them to see if they're being bribed to go against the country. And if that resulted to him being assassinated, then so be it. It was just this powerful speech that I thought like a true leader would give. And I was really I was like, who is this guy? I wish that someone in like, American politics would take this stance. But to see that he is, he's also, his parents immigrated to El Salvador. They're Palestinian. So to see his silence on the censorship that's in that realm is also disheartening to see. That kind of knocks him down a peg for me, especially given his UN speech that he gave, which basically ridiculed America on American soil, which was absolutely a standing ovation level, basically talking about the censorship, talking about you guys used to be the pinnacle of freedom, and now you lock your basic goods behind a shelf at a CVS, and and then to now he has really cozied up with Trump, earning a $6 million contract to house these 200 people, undocumented, illegal, whatever you would like to call them, that did not get the due process. So I'd like to show the video of the hot mic moment of him being at the White House. This is from the El Salvadorian government that was live streaming this kind of walkthrough through the Oval Office and different office spaces within the White House. And they caught this hot mic moment.
In love with you. Well, I'm not here supportive. I want him to, homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said, homegrowns are next. The homegrowns. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right? it's not big enough. No, yeah. Come on. So this is a much different office than you're in.
Homegrown meaning American citizens being sent there.
Yeah. Which people say, oh, that's just kind of Trump being Trump. He's just laying it out there. You have, I'll add to the stage, the true American sweetheart, Eric Prince from Blackwater, basically working
I'm America's sweetheart. How dare you? Go on. I'm sorry.
Which, if we remember Eric Blackwell, I was a kid, but I've heard of the scandals that happened in Iraq that resulted in some of the people that his employees being sentenced with manslaughter and murder. But I digress. He has been in correspondence with officials from El Salvador to facilitate the deportation of around 100,000 people. And within the correspondence, he says that this would take the legal question that's kind of being proposed right now. They need to have due process. Are these people really criminals? Out of the question. This will be just the private sector being intertwined with the government.
Well, I'm sorry. How does it take the due process issue out of it? I didn't get that.
Because it's a private company doing it.
The private company is taking them there?
What part of it is a due process question? Because we have private prisons within the U.S.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very good point.
Well, whether or not they should be deported is the due process question.
Yeah. So this is taking that out of the question.
I don't really understand that claim.
So what's happening right now is that you have the Trump administration basically saying, once the court order came and said that the plane cannot go to El Salvador, they were kind of like, oops, it's already in international waters. So you land that to a private company that it's going to funnel these people out of here as fast as they can. You're evading that legal question, is what I presume.
Right, but they would be handed over by the government, so I don't see how that would solve the due process issue.
So this means what Eric Prince wants is that with ICE officials may be present, but this will be private contractors who are going and doing these raids, conducting these raids of pulling these people out.
So
that'd be strange.
Let me ask a question. Aside from the due process issue, which I don't mean to dismiss at all, it's an important part of it. But aside from that, do we inherently object to housing prisoners in El Salvador?
I think without the due process, if these happen to be criminals, yes.
Well, I think there's another issue too, which is that what are the prison conditions? I mean, the way that they were treated upon arrival, where they were like forced to bend down and could barely walk. I mean, that's not exactly torture, but if they're like bragging about that and starting off with that, that really makes me wonder what it's like there. I mean, I think, and I don't want any prisoner who deserves to be in prison to be pampered, but I also don't want them to be treated inhumanely. I haven't heard much about that.
That's the tactic, to dehumanize them, essentially.
Yeah.
And
that's always a tactic from the standpoint of the public, to get the public involved and behind something. Is if you dehumanize them, then people will go along with something. And there's another comment about extraordinary rendition. People talk about Gitmo and things like that. But if you're talking about private companies doing raids where there's an ICE guy standing there, and that makes it therefore legal, I guess, or something like that.
I don't get that at all. I got to read up on that.
I definitely, I mean, that to me would seem to be a problematic thing, because that would be a negative combining of private and government activity. I think that's what you're getting at, right, Morgan?
Yes, and I make no illusions that we haven't already been doing such. Excuse me. But I was going to show also, I didn't have time to upload it, is an article that was written on January of this year that basically, as Biden's way out, he opened up a lot more beds in these private, we already have private facilities to detain immigrants that are going to be transferred for deportation. So he was opening up more beds, basically welcoming this plan of what Trump wanted to do. So this kind of goes into the face of some of these the left-leaning circles where Biden might have done something differently. I wanted to just expose that, because there already has been an intermingling of private sector and government for this purpose, which I find a conflict of interest, because I find it just to be a big business kind of thing. And
then there's just the incentive to keep putting people in prison and making money off it. See, if it weren't for that, if we could be assured that these people are getting due process and be assured that the conditions were appropriate, then I wouldn't mind them being in another country, because they're just in prison anyway. What difference does it make? They're in prison, and then when they get out, they come back.
And they're also not supposed to be in the United States, though, either.
Well, that's different. Yeah, I was talking about just the big picture, because now they're talking about U.S. prisoners too. But that's another thing. Yeah, if you're going to deport people, and now they're saying, I guess there was a court decision that there has to be a trial for every single person deported. But like the numbers in the millions of the illegal aliens. So I don't know how that's supposed to be resolved in any kind of just way.
Well, I think because you get the instances like this young man that's kind of been in the news lately, the Abrego Garcia, who, but the media is kind of doing a poor job at portraying this. He had a withhold of removal back in 2019 when he was taken up at a Home Depot. The police said that he may have had, affiliation with MS-13 through this Chicago Bulls hat.
But also his wife, he had already had problems because of beating his wife, and this is the same guy.
I'm not sure about this.
I'm getting two different things confused, actually.
No, you're thinking about what goes on at your house, right?
Still, it's the other way around, Jeff. You're going to have to learn. It's the other way.
Whatever. Hey, and then there's our other friend, Mahmoud Khalil, who we've been discussing. And there's an update on that. It looks like Citizen Jeff, America's sweetheart, was pretty much right. And if we're going to go by Andy McCarthy's interpretation, he wrote an article. And if you remember, Morgan, Jose's not with us now, but I think you and Jose were on at the same time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I was saying that I don't think this guy is a good poster child. Like, it's not necessarily just a free speech issue. because he was the negotiator while his fellow activists were illegally occupying a building. And I don't know how you negotiate without trying to get what you want. And if he's trying to get what he wants while his fellow activists are illegally occupying a building, that's kind of extortionate. And I consider that sort of the elephant in the room. People like Glenn Greenwald and everybody who's supporting Khalil talk about him being a negotiator, as though that label somehow establishes that he's neutral and innocent. And so forth. Yeah, he's not neutral at all. He's a fellow protester. He just wasn't in the building at the time. So what kind of negotiating was he doing? Anyway, that's kind of wordy there, but basically,
it's a wall. You're building a wall, Jeff.
Rubio submitted a memo in which he described. He didn't actually charge him with anything illegal, but he did mention something that is consistent with what I said, which is that it's on the next page, and the last part I highlighted there. His decision is based on citations for unlawful activity during these protests, which I've described above. That's Andy McCarthy's words. So as I said, I think that they don't want to charge him for this because they want to win on this vague statute that authorizes the Secretary of State to simply declare that, somebody is acting in conflict with U.S. foreign policy. That's what they want to win, so they don't have to prove anything.
That's the
but if they have
Enemies
to,
Act.
I have a feeling they could prosecute him on this. Go ahead, Morgan. You want to be Jose's surrogate and tell me what a white supremacist?
I guess like the moral picture that I have is, yes, these students occupied a building. I would consider that an act of civil disobedience.
Well, it's trespass.
Okay.
At minimum.
Well, just the scenario that I would like to get your input on is, the sit-ins, where essentially Black people were breaking the law. They were not allowed to sit in these bar stools. If there had been some person who, was here on a visa, that was basically the person who was saying, this is what, this is why people are doing it. We want to be able to have the free movement and be able to sit at the counter with someone, regardless of the color of the skin.
Right. And what happened too, they actually ended up packing all of the jails. They were all full.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but that's not analogous to what was going on at Columbia, because they weren't suffering from a similar injustice. They were insisting that Columbia should divest from Israel. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to want, but that's not analogous to, sitting in some place where they're not being served in a restaurant or not being able to sit, in the front of the bus like Rosa Parks. That's a different
Well, I'm
thing.
just making the correlation of they were literally breaking the law. And,
Yeah.
In retrospect, we look at it that disobedience being acceptable and needed, and to confront people with how absurd that law was. And now I do think.
And they were willing to do that. That's true. They were willing to accept the consequences of what they were doing.
Right. But there's no such comparable absurd law. They're not protesting an absurd law. They're protesting that Columbia is investing in Israel.
Which, I mean, I think is absurd.
Okay, that's fine.
I think it's
That's
absurd
fine.
when you find out that these tuitions are absurd. They put students into debt, and then that's where the money's being funneled. Or that the fact that they're getting money from the government to then turn around and ask you, to go bankrupt by a bank, and they'll give you some shoddy student loan.
I'm not saying it would be easy, but I would rather see them do something that's more similar to the Montgomery bus boycott, where they really targeted the culprit, right? And it was a very clear injustice, and they made a very clear, reasonable demand that, if met, would end the boycott, which was, we are going to harm you economically, bus company, by not riding it. If you change your policy, we'll come back, and that will end the boycott. Now, I don't know if it's easy or not, probably not, but I would rather see the Columbia students do something like trying to hurt Columbia's pocketbook. If they can drum up some support and like not pay tuition or something like that, that would be.
I mean, not paying tuition, that's not going to do it, because all of these universities have huge endowments. And I think that's part of what the Trump administration is doing, is they're saying, any government funding or tax exempt status that you have as a university is going to be pulled if you don't stop this activity.
Right.
So I don't know how you actually would take that to the next level because it's so deeply embedded.
So did you see the article or the YouTube podcast that Alan Dershowitz did about the Harvard situation where, Harvard is supposedly standing up to the Trump administration? You know what I'm talking about?
I didn't see that.
No.
All right, but you know what I'm talking about, that Harvard is supposedly standing up to the Trump administration, not
Yes,
giving in. Right.
As far as what I'm kind of understanding, it also has to do with DEI, what he's trying to do and kind of weeding that out. But it also has something to do with the ending.
So according to Alan Dershowitz, who for 50 years or something like that was a professor at Harvard, and he kind of knows the players and how things operate, he said that's just what they're saying to placate the liberal professors and people like that. But what's actually going on behind the scenes is that they hired lawyers who are lawyers who are friendly to the Trump administration, and they are actually negotiating with the Trump administration instead of being so defiant like what they're trying to do. And sounds, he's in his territory. This is the sort of thing that Dershowitz knows. So I have a feeling he's right about that.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
It is.
The Ryan Moulton boycott. Ryan said, if I don't get what I want, you aren't going to see my face. We never gave in to your demand, and you're back. Boy, you buckled easily.
That's right. Well, it was the check.
Boycotting, I think that it's such a big issue because you're also introducing, the military-industrial complex that is so intertwined with a lot of industries, and even industries that we don't even fully, would think. I know that Amazon's web service is fully intertwined with getting government contracts for military purposes. So where would you even begin with boycotting?
Well, did you see Bernie Sanders had a big rally, and it was a huge event. It looked like the entire stadium was full, and people were standing up, demonstrating to free Palestine, and getting arrested. And of course, he's been hit by this a number of times because I think people who are the left and whatever, they're now starting to get tired of his story where he sounds like he's standing up for the little guy, but he's really not. He's really bending over to. Yeah, that's exactly my point, right? So so then when these people were getting arrested, nobody cheered for them getting arrested. What is going on here? The entire crowd was going.
You're not
nuts.
that good looking anyway. As long as we can hear you, it's fine.
Hey, wait a second. Right? Look at this. Who needs hair, right?
Who needs a?
I am that good. I am that good looking.
Change it to who needs a camera that works.
Who needs a camera? But anyway, just to the point of the demonstrations and people making waves, they're demonstrating against him. He's a guy who folded to the entire establishment, and people saw that.
Water for Hillary Clinton. He's a phony.
Exactly, he's a total phony. So,
and also look how many events he and AOC are doing. I can't see how they're possibly serving their constituents' needs, given how many events they're doing. They're like attention whores.
It is very performative, and it is it's very upsetting to see because that this is going to be memory holden to everyone, and everyone will forget, and they'll tell you to vote for the the lesser of the two evils, and that'll be it. And people will listen, but that demonstration of just people kind of defiantly, both all screaming the Free Palestine chant while these people were being escorted out was insane to see. I think because it goes right in the face of what Bernie says, I think he signed on to Lindsey Graham's bill that said that, we will always support Israel's right to self-defense and
yeah. and this, this is the whole thing in my mind where Trump could actually capitalize very well because yesterday, Bobby Kennedy had his first press conference as the head of HHS. And he says, we're looking at the change in, autism, right? So he said, and he mentioned many different studies. In one case, it was 1 out of 10,000 in the state of Alabama. There was 65 children for the entire state that had autism, and then they start doing these studies over the last 20 years. You've had this meteoric rise. Now, immediately when I posted that on Facebook, everybody's like, "Oh, he's crazy. He's saying it's vaccines." Now, if you look at what the CDC report said, and you look at what he said, they never mentioned vaccines, not one time. So what I'm saying is, if you look at all these, the way that things are, you have a break in the situation where anybody who wants to find out what's going on, whether it's healthcare or a number of things, they were gravitating towards Bobby. Bobby teamed up with Trump. Trump says he's against war. You have a potential to get an alignment of people in the public around some sane policies. Trump needs to get more focused on these kinds of things, because a lot of this stuff, Letitia James, what's her name, crackpot, who's now an astronaut, all the women at The View, a lot of this stuff is very superficial. All of the really important things that people actually care about in terms of your due process, your civil rights. Are we going to be taxed to death to maintain a financial bubble? War, peace, economy. These are all things that, regardless of party, everybody cares about. And they actually want to have a solution. Trump could actually focus and address that. Don't you think? It's like that time in the population. And that's what the demonstrations against Bernie mean to me, actually.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you're right. And I think Trump plays into being this showman.
But everybody does. That's my point.
In a sense, I feel like, he's more like, leans deeper into this own the lib moment, where sometimes it is satisfying to do, but other times it's absolutely just, nonsense, and it's just a waste of time. Like today, where he basically told Israel, "No, you're not striking Iran." Like that is brilliant. That is what I want to see, is someone
right.
And that's not popularized, by the way, that he would say that. That's not being made that public. They always show pictures.
It just happened. Give it a chance.
Yeah, but he said already.
ReachGotReady.com, and he's got the. But the other thing is, Bill Maher recently met with Trump, and he's getting a lot of flack from the liberals, the lefties, the progressives, whatever you want to call these nice people. And I think they're saying, well, he shouldn't have done that. He normalizes Trump, blah, 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 blah. But I think if you're neutral, you should be interested to know whether or not Trump is crazy. And that's something that Bill Maher revealed, which I think others have revealed too, is that he is much different behind the scenes. Others have said the same thing that Bill Maher said, which was that he had no problem at all. He had no big ego. Maher was disagreeing with him. Trump took it just fine. He made perfect sense. He was coherent. And so his act, it's fine if you don't like it, but I think we should all realize that it is an act. It's an act. And nobody has ever seen an act like this before, right? Don Rickles has never been president. Don Rickles was a comedian. And we actually have
a guy who's... Jeff?
What?
When was that? Was that when you had to walk up and turn the channel on the TV when he was a comedian?
I'm saying that Trump actually is part Rickles. He is, and people aren't used to it. And it's like we've never had a president who is part Rickles, but we do. We do now.
Reagan had a lot of comedy to it, but there's always
no. He wasn't an insult comic. Trump is an insult comic.
Fair.
Yeah,
that's true. Fair. He is totally an insult comic.
And again, you don't have to like it, but he's not crazy. He's wrong about this and that, but he's not crazy.
And remember, you have, his advisor Witkoff, or he's not the advisor, he's the negotiator. He's negotiating all kinds of very interesting things. And you have, from the Russians, you have a lot of people saying, hey, things are moving in the right direction. So you almost have to ignore, if you're serious, like you're a political junkie, you have to ignore all of the Trump antics.
Flamboyant,
You have to ignore that and not be so, crazy.
Or just
and
take it what it is. I mean, ignore it is one way of putting it, but accept it for what it is. Don't misinterpret it as something.
Or
By the way,
just
we should mention
overreact.
that Morgan is multi-talented. She has created some animation for a new podcast that we're going to do. I'm producing and Scott Ritter will be hosting, called Trump Watch. And that is a weekly show where Scott will interview one guest per week, and it'll be sort of a report card about all things Trump, which means sometimes Scott will be praising Trump and sometimes criticizing him. And, we'll let the audience judge how well we do it. But I would argue right off the bat that it's likely to be a great show. And the mission that we've picked, I think, is exactly what's needed. Meaning that almost everybody is like either anti-Trump or pro-Trump. There aren't that many people who can go both ways, but Scott can.
And I think episode 1 is going to be about are his campaign promises actually coming true? Is he actually starting to make good on those promises?
No.
Isn't that what he said? That's what Scott said.
That's going to be one of the things that are evaluated every episode.
Okay.
Yeah. The first episode is probably.
I've been I've been helping you guys, and I've been eagerly.
Yeah, you're
waiting
very
for this.
talented. You're very talented, and we're looking forward to that. Now, the first episode, it could change, but it's probably going to be about immigration, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, but each time it'll be like, whether is it constitutional? Is he living up to his campaign promises? And I forgot one other thing. So that's going to be like the kind of framing for each issue. And then they're going to grade. Scott and the guest will grade it, like using the traditional report card A through F thing on that.
And just to go back to something on all of the craziness about politics, don't forget that even the New York Times came out with a big, long article that said that top American military people said that there was a danger of going to nuclear war if we did too much with Ukraine. And for whatever people want to say about Donald Trump, he did want to prevent nuclear war. And Scott ran that campaign himself in the population because we can't do anything. Scott never does anything. And in fact, we definitely avoided nuclear war, which we would not have avoided if Kamala were there.
Oh yeah, it would have been full steam ahead.
Yeah.
All right, this is all very important stuff, but I want to say something else that may be even more important. Earlier, I said I didn't like it that much, but as it's been breathing more, I've never had a wine with it had to breathe more than an hour. So since I was saying it's not that great, it's only fair for me to say actually after about an hour and 15 minutes or so, it started to get a lot better, and I'm digging it now.
So it wasn't the 20-minute rule that Mark Musar from Chateau, what was it? Chateau
Moose.
No, Chateau Musar, and his name was Mark, I forget.
Hochar.
Mark Hochar from Chateau Musar. So he said there was a 20-minute rule. Where does the wine go after 20 minutes? So it took longer than 20 minutes for it to open up and get good.
It did. It did.
But did you double aerate it?
No. I just poured it into a glass.
I forgot to show that. I'm going to show that in the future, how you double aerate.
All right. Well, anyway, let's call it an episode. Thanks a lot, Morgan and Ryan, and thanks to our beloved audience. Please join us tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for the loquacious version of Ask the Inspector with our pal Scott Ritter. And we will be back next week at the usual time for the Whiners, every Thursday at 7 Eastern. Morgan is now a regular. Is this a firm commitment from you, Morgan? Like the mail carrier, rain, sleet, or shine, come hell or high water, you'll be here on Thursdays?
Yes, I enjoy talking to you guys.
And look at your camera, too. You are so clear. I can see you so well. But you can't see me.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, Morgan's getting more and more professional, and Ryan's getting less and less professional.
Hey, how do you know that was not done on purpose?
Oh, well, if you did, that would be very unprofessional. Because it's not funny at all. All right.
She's
laughing.
laughing.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.